Meaning within that one favor, my sip of water as my example, there are so many hundreds and thousands and millions of favors from Allah that came about in order for me to take that sip of water. You cannot count it. You cannot unpack one favor of Allah. The praise is for Allah, it means all praise. Because even if I take a sip of water, I made this example in the past. I take a sip of water. Why should I say all praise for Allah if I just had one favor, which is a sip of water? I should say, hey, praise is for Allah. But Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, in the formula which He teaches you and I to show gratitude and thanks and praise to Him, tells us that in every single favor that you observe, there are thousands of other favors that are within that favor. No, because when I took a sip of water, how did the water get to my mouth? I used my arm. When I use my arm, I require energy. So it's a sip of water plus the energy in my arm. But when I use my arm, not only did I require energy, I required muscle. If there was no muscle in my arm, I would have struggled to bring the cup to my mouth. Then I had to use this joint. If Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala didn't allow this joint to move, my arm was straight, how am I going to bring the cup to my mouth? So it's muscle, it's energy, it's the grip of my fingers, it's the bending of my elbow. But that's just me bringing the cup to my mouth. What about the cup that holds the water? Someone had to make the cup. So whatever cup it is, someone had to manufacture it. And for somebody to have manufactured it, it required some engineering. And for whatever engineering was required, it required somebody's intellectual capacity, or the intellectual capacities of a number of people, to actually manufacture a cup that could be used here in the masjid when I took a sip of water. And wherever that cup was manufactured, it was the brain power, and then it was machinery, and then it was people working in that factory. And every person working in that factory to manufacture the cup also required a brain and power and intellect and muscle, more favors and favors and favors, and therefore that one sip of water. Right. That's the cup. Then they use the cup to get some water out of the tap. How did the water get to the tap? How much plumbing? You're on this property. How much plumbing? You know what plumbers charge these days? 1 point. So that payment had to be made for plumbers, and plumbers required skill sets, and then there was labor, and then there was digging, and there was grinding, and that's just here at the masjid. What about the water that reaches the masjid? They had to dig trenches in the ground, and had to lay pipes all the way to our reservoirs. And even the reservoir had to also be built, and there was more engineering and more intelligence and more and more. And then thousands of laborers to lay those pipes and then to close up the pipes. And then the station where the water is purified and whatever gets added to the water. And then at the reservoir, it needs to evaporate. And clouds need to carry that water, and then it needs to fall. How much favors went into that sip of water? So Allah says, وَإِن تَعُدُّوا نِعْمَةَ اللَّهِ. And Allah doesn't say if you're trying to count the favors of Allah. Allah says, if you're trying to count a favor, one favor. Allah didn't say, وَإِن تَعُدُّوا نِعَمَ اللَّهِ. Allah said, وَإِن تَعُدُّوا نِعْمَةَ اللَّهِ. If you try to count one favor of Allah, لَا تُحْصُهَا. You'll never be able to count that one favor of Allah. Meaning within that one favor, my sip of water as my example, there are so many hundreds and thousands and millions of favors from Allah that came about in order for me to take that sip of water. You cannot count it. You cannot unpack one favor of Allah. That's a sip of water. You're wearing a thawb. How did they make the thawb? Where does the material come from? Where does the dye come from? Okay, machines, manufacturing, stitching, the cotton. إلى آخر. Take any favor of Allah, you won't be able to list how many favors exist within that favor. وإن تعدوا نعمة الله لا تحصوها. So think of Allah's favors and then ask yourself, should I not be grateful?